daunting to think that we might have to be back there in a week to restock. But other than that, you know, we'll have to see how it goes. But yeah, the week's been going good so far. It's only Wednesday. Thankfully, there's still at least 2 more days of this week for me to enjoy my time away from my work.
Yeah.
You know, so there's that. I have a lot of things to continue doing. You know, before the week is over. So it's one of those things, right? Your vacation always kind of slips away from you because you got so many things you need to get done that you don't
Yeah.
normally do because you're working, right? So, um, yeah, just but other than that, it's going really well. I'm having a good
Good.
time.
Good.
Good to be
So,
back.
a question with I would call it an account. The shop or store or restaurant that you guys did your spices to. Is this one to where like if you had to make another trip out next week, it's like, oh, this could be a really big client for you guys, or is it there may be something special going on that they'd be using more of your product more than normal?
So it's a new place for us. It's essentially like a handmade vendor, right? Um, but based on their location, they're really close to the U.S. border, so they get
Okay.
a lot of like winery, brewery tour folks coming across the border and then coming in to shop because it's all handmade, and
Mhm.
because our stuff is food items. I don't know, wine and beer go really well with food normally, so food items tend to do really well. But the this person that's running this shop told us when we were down there on Tuesday that like most of their vendors are clearing, you know, somewhere between 5 to 8 grand a month in product.
Wow.
Uh, and we were like, dear God, like that's more than what we make in like a month of shows on weekends, right?
Yeah.
So if that's 1 month, uh, just at their store, let alone all the other places that we're in and all the other shows we're doing and stuff, we're going to be very, very busy making spices. So it's going to be pretty rough, but we'll see. We'll see how it goes.
Well, hopefully, this will be a gateway into either like a booming business that you guys want, or maybe it'll just give you the knowledge of like, we still want to stay like smaller, and we appreciate that you can do 5x what we're doing now, but we'd like to keep it a little content.
Mhm. I think my partner will be happy if she can pull in that kind of money in a month.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
like I told her, I said, like, if you end up pulling in 10,000 profit in a month from this one store, you're making more money than I am at my job.
And you're like, if I could do that doing content creation, absolutely.
Well, no, that would be like, okay, you're going to teach me how to make these spices, and we're literally going to I'm going to quit my job and we're going to do that.
Oh, that's great. SD, how are you, sir? How was your weekend?
I'm all right. My life is not as exciting as being a spice runner in Canada, but yeah, I'm just kind of doing the whole 9 to 5 or 8 to 4 in my case, and coming home and falling asleep in my recliner. Kind of have the opposite of MrBever's, where I kind of wish the whole week away so I can get to the weekend. But yeah, I have not done anything, I guess, productive this week. So
Well, that's okay. Not sometimes it's nice to not do something productive. Like I was telling you guys precast, like I'm like knees deep or sleeves deep in like wedding stuff, and me and my partner, uh, we genuinely are looking forward to our wedding. But I know from her perspective, it's like she wants to be done with all of this, like little details and having to like worry about this and that. And I mean, she's taking a lot of the workload on herself, and I, even with the little part that she lets me help with, I felt the same way. So I'm envious of your 8 to 4 sleeping in a recliner. That sounds really nice. All right. Well, I think we're going to go ahead and get started for our Twitch and YouTube groups. So I hope you guys really enjoy this show. 3, 2, 1.
Hey, everybody. It's Mr. B here. You can find me in a number of places like Twitch, YouTube, Twitter, all those crazy places. MrBevers, that's what you got to look for. Cracking packs, booster packs, playing some Commander, all those good things. And I've always wanted to have a Planeswalker friend just like you.
SD Sharpie here. If you want to reach out to me, you can find me on Twitter at SD_Sharpie or in the CMD Discord. And I've always wanted to live in a multiverse near you.
Hey, he got it. All right. And hey, it's me, Mr. Common Number 5. I'm your annoying voice and face that you see on way too much of our stuff. You can always get at me at Twitter at Mr. Common Number 5, all spelled out except for the 5. I also do run our primary Twitter about 30% of the time. So at CMDTower on there as well. And like, hey, let's make the most of this beautiful board state. Here in MrBever's neighborhood, we are here to address the salt and sodium in the room. Every episode, we're going to address a top salty card from the EDHREC.com salty list. And of course, we're working off of the year 2021. And then have our dear friend MrBevers help us through how to navigate the social constructs around it. We do this all through the following. Number one, what makes this card annoying and salt-inducing, whether this be community experiences that we've had, our own just general thoughts, things that maybe even the rules committee have put out. But then why do we, us specifically, MrBevers, SD, and me, react this way if we do it all? And if we don't react that way, why don't we? And then finally, how can we form habits that can really change this reaction and way of thinking and, just over the long haul? So, of course, we mentioned pre-audio that we finally got a card. Because I would say SD's a lot like myself. I mean, MrBevers, nothing really gets him riled up. But SD and I, to where it's like we're kind of like combo tryhards, but like we're down to see gross, disgusting stuff. And then I threw out, how about number 50 on the EDH salty list in Thieves Auction, and he about quit. So SD, why don't you read what Thieves Auction is? Give us, roughly how many decks you might see it in on EDHREC, if there's a notable printing, just some like little information about it before we start the episode.
So we've got Thieves Auction for triple red and 4 generic. You have a sorcery that says, set aside all cards in play, starting with you. Each player chooses one of the cards set aside and puts it into play tapped under his or her control. You repeat this process until all those cards have been chosen. It looks like it's seeing play in about 2,524 decks on EDHREC, and I guess an interesting printing would be the white border 8th edition with the kind of confusing text, I guess, because it says set aside instead of exile. So,
well, it's basically like the OG from Mercurian Masks, just without the additional reminder text on there about enchantments. Well, before we get into this, we would love for you guys, if you have a salty card that you want to play, and maybe you don't want to go buy it, and this card's only a couple bucks, so not a big deal, but sometimes there's a card out there that just pisses everyone off, and you don't want to spend $50 on it. That's where proxies.com really comes into play. They are our playtest proxy sponsor. Code CMDTower for their website to get you 10% off. They have everything you need on there. Plus, you guys can also go to our link tree, and you'll also find their great links on there. So just remember, abyssproxyshop.com, code CMDTower, if you're looking for a playtest. So now, SD, remember, this isn't your specific feelings. We got to save that. Why do you think the community doesn't like this card? Because, I mean, number 50, it's not 100 where it's fringe, but it's also not number 1. It seems odd to be right in the middle.
I think that altogether, the reason people don't like this kind of goes back to the previous episode, like Winter Orb, and we talked about that, and Vorinclex. People don't like you messing with their stuff. When it comes to Vorinclex and Winter Orb, they don't like you messing with their lands, whereas Thieves Auction is you're just messing with all their stuff. You're just going to take it all. And I don't think people thoroughly enjoy that very often.
So some of the things that I had read up on that, like, why do people get so mad at it? The weird thing, it seemed like the noisiest of the community was your combo players and your aggro players. Which it's just like they're very opposite ends of the spectrum. I mean, both of them are trying to end the game as quickly as possible. they're doing some overwhelming thing. It's just I would argue that we usually look at aggro as being more fair and combo being less fair. Yet both of them are number one. They're like, F this card, Thieves Auction, we don't want it. And it makes sense, I guess, because a combo player, it's like you're trying to get your right enchantments, the right mana rocks, got to get your commander out. Maybe you've had to deal with some of your opponent's stuff. An aggro player, you just got done producing 25 tokens. You're trying to give them haste or aggravated assault, things like that. And then Thieves Auction comes down and it's like, hey, you know all that hard work you did for like 4 turns and you just went straight gas, Underworld Breach like 19 times. All of that's getting shuffled up. Let's go. The thing I don't get is why this card is like, I guess, saltier than possibly like Scrambleverse and some of the other cards that are kind of similar. But I do think from a community perspective, it seems like it's the aggro and the combo players that just really don't vibe with this particular card. Mr. B, what do you think of it?
I mean, I think that you're both right on the money here, right? With this one, is that I think a lot of people don't like it specifically because it mucks with their stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
As SD so elegantly put, right? Basically, people don't like things that are gonna change the way they play their game, right? A lot of folks will sit down at a commander table and be like, here's my game plan, right? My deck is going to try to win in this way, or this way. And then a card like Thieves Auction goes, okay, well, now you can't win in any of those ways. How are you going to win? Um, so, it basically stymies a lot of, like you said, combo decks. But the thing it does with aggro decks, as you said, since it's kind of opposite ends of the spectrum, it takes away, I guess, their upside of having probably more attackers than you have blockers, right? That kind of thing. So it kind of evens out the battlefield in that sense. And that's why I think you'll find that a lot of folks don't like this type of card or this type of interaction, because it's basically like casting something similar to like a balance or something like that, right? Where you're just basically setting everybody back to normal. Balance is probably less salty because you're not taking their things, right?
Yeah.
I think most of the time you'll find, and this is probably due also to the fact that it's only run in what is like 2,300 decks or something like that, which is a very small number when you think about the total decks on EDH Rec, right?
Sure.
It's probably that people are playing this card are probably playing in a deck where they're like, I have things that I don't care if you take them, right? And therefore it's very like one-sided in the aspect of that person who casts this is probably getting a whole bunch of benefit and not really losing anything of note, right? And whereas the people who are losing things are probably losing things that are much more interesting and exciting than what they're gaining, right, from the card. Now that being said, I mean, there's obviously lots of other ways this can go as well, right? So it's one of those interesting ones for sure.
So, one other thing I kind of thought of, and SD, I'm curious if you think this adds into why people get frustrated with this card. Two things just kind of sitting here playing the card through my head. One, it does say non-token permanent, so that will include your lands. So part one question, do you think part of the feel bad is people have seen how someone will just get screwed out of lands and they just get a bunch of just like trash? It's like, oh great, I got 4 equipments, a 2-drop commander, and I don't know, a grave pact, but I have no mana to do anything with. So that's the first. But the B of that, do you also think it's because people are cheating? Not cheating, but they're playing the card to their advantage? Because it does also say non-token. We've seen
Right.
the influx of tokens now. You could create 50 treasures with your dockside, do Thieves Auction, you still have 50 treasures, and now you have a whole new thing of resources to like work with. So, one, do you think it's because people get screwed out of their lands? And then two, do you think it's because now we have this influx of treasures, or we've had, that there's maybe not as much disadvantage for the caster?
Yeah, I think that's true. I agree with both of those. I think like earlier you stated, it's the combo players and the aggro players. The combo players are the ones that are losing their lands. They're sitting there with minimal resources. They're not going to have a bunch of creatures and stuff like that. They're going to have mana rocks and lands to try and combo off with, and they're going to lose all that. And like you said, it sucks to get stuck with equipment or enchantments that don't do anything with your deck. As far as like the cheating, the cheating goes, yeah, the tokens is one of them, but you have a number of cards that actually kind of screw your opponents over if they get them. You know, things that say they can't cast creature spells or they can't do this and they can't do that. You usually see those types of cards paired with Thieves Auction. So I think what you said is very true.
And of course, we can't forget there is, because it combos with like a billion cards to Fairy's Protection. We get it. We don't want to hear it. It's one card that does the same thing with like a billion other people. So, yes, if you want to play this, hold priority to Fairy's Protection, you will get the most advantage out of it. But it's the same way with Armageddon and all those other ones. So to me, that kind of falls on deaf ears a little bit. MrBevers, any last thoughts from yourself?
I'm thinking something similar along the lines of what you mentioned about the, in quotations, cheating, right? With having, like you have a pile of treasures and stuff. One of the other things that could be happening too is because the card has never been printed with its errated text, people might be exiling tokens not thinking about it, right?
Oh,
And being like, "Oh, I'm a go wide token deck," and all of a sudden all my tokens are gone.
yep,
Crap, right? And people are playing it like a pseudo board wipe because it's like, "Well, we exile all your tokens, now they're gone forever, so whatever," right?
yeah.
When it doesn't in fact do that, it exiles all non-token permanents. So it might be one of those things where if someone doesn't necessarily know the card has been errated to say that, they won't necessarily know, right?
Yeah,
And therefore, you might be getting opponents who are feeling salty because they've just had their board wiped when really it shouldn't have happened, right?
yeah,
Um, that kind of thing, right? And I mean, obviously, there's also a salt level here with this card around resolving the card and its effect, right? Like, I mean, this card probably takes you the better part of half an hour to resolve, depending on how many permanents are on the board, right?
yeah,
And this is all because, like, let's say at a minimum everybody has 6 permanents in play when this card is cast, right? Because you have to have 7 mana, so let's say you have at least some sort of ramp or something, right? Which obviously red generally has quite a bit of ramp these days, um or acceleration, I guess is the best way of putting it. But that's, you know you're talking 30 to 40 permanents that then have to be essentially drafted, right, by the table, uh which, anyone knows a draft takes forever, right? Like, you do a draft with sealed packs and you pick one card and pass the other 14, and it takes, the better part of 45 minutes to do 3 packs back and forth winding through the table. Well, now you've got 40 cards that have to be picked one at a time by 4 people, basically, right? So yeah, it'll take a while. So I can see where people would maybe be like, "Oh, we were going to try to get 2 games in tonight, and now we're only going to get 1 game in, maybe." Right? So that can definitely add to the salt level for sure.
No, that's totally fair. All right. Well, we're going to head on to our next section to hear maybe about each of our own personal thoughts, feelings and scars, apparently, in SP's case. But before we do that, we'd love for you guys to check out our great patron community, patreon.com/CMDTower. We have tiers starting at $1, $5, 15, and 25. And really, the dollar just kind of helps grow our subscriber base. Um, it helps, the little bit that really does help go a long way. But one of the things that we have done is with SP and Marketing Ross come on, we have opened up a good 30% of our Discord. So if you join the dollar, you'll actually get access to way more. So if you've been in the Discord since we've had it open and it's free and you're like, I'd like to get a little bit more, if you sign up for at least the dollar, you're going to unlock at least 8 other channels. So patreon.com/CMDTower, lots of great stuff on there for you. Now, I personally do not feel this way because now reading the card didn't explain the card, but reading the errata text explained the card. I think, MrBevers, to kind of continue from what you were just saying, where people are like, oh man, they're shuffling up 60 permanents, 40 permanents and doing this. I bet you that's because, though, they're also shuffling their tokens as well. I would imagine, because I would think me as a seasoned Magic player, I'd probably realize like, hey, you're exiling the tokens, and so they actually won't go there. But I bet you there's a lot of people that think that's more of like phasing. Like, hey, phase out all the permanents. You guys pick what you want. They come back in. No ETB effects. No nothing. So the tokens stay. So it does make it go a lot longer. For me though, I'm at a stage in my Magic career where I do like chaos. So if someone has this card in their deck and it's their spice card, as we would call it on bruising builds, I'd be okay with it. It's like, oh, that's sweet. Like I have one Armageddon in my Kalia deck, and it does fit my deck, but also I don't need the card. I don't need a tutor to go get it. You could run a Thieves Auction and say, hey, I do have some really bad permanents, or I have some things that'll get me a one-time use, and then once I use it, I can't really use it again. And so Thieves Auction would be a nice spice card to help me reset the game a little bit. I think that'd be fun, and I'm here for that. Um, yeah, I would not be mad at all. Plus, getting the 7 mana in, and that's trip red as well. I'm gonna assume you had to work towards it. It wasn't just I'm playing mono red and I'm doing this, because it doesn't feel like mono red at all. So I know SD has some scars that are being opened. The scabs are oozing. Why are you so hurt by this card?
Um, First off, I think it goes back to what Mr. B said, just how long it takes to resolve this spell, and I'm I'm kind of getting up there in age, pushing 30. So when I go to the LGS and I sit down to play a game, I don't want to spend 30 to 40 minutes resolving a spell when I'm probably only going to be there for an hour or two before I go back home to fall asleep in my chair. Um, that's the main thing. Um, Another thing that I don't like is I kind of have an expensive Magic collection, and I don't enjoy this card because I get really nervous when other people have my expensive Magic cards, and it's very easy to finish up a game, an hour later after resolving the spell, and whoops, you forgot to get your Grim Monolith from that guy you've never seen before, and you're never going to see it again. That's the main issues I have with it. Another one is I'm a combo player, so I'm sitting there with my lands and my my artifacts, and I get kind of, I guess, crapped on at the end of the spell. So I was telling Mr. Combo precast, I would be okay with this in my play group, like just my group of friends meeting up at one of our houses and playing. It wouldn't really bother me there. But as far as the LGS goes, it's gonna be Scoop City population me every time.
I love it. Scoop City. Well, here's one thing I'll say. I genuinely hadn't given it much thought about the randoms playing with my really expensive cards. That is a really good point. MrBever's, you typically don't get salty or like I don't want to see that card played. But how do you feel about Thieves Auction?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting interaction, and it's something that you don't see that often, right? I mean, obviously, it's only in 2,300 decks, so obviously, we're not seeing it that often.
Yep.
Um, but I think the people that are playing it very specifically, um, to sort of throw off their opponents, right, or to abuse it in some way. Um, and I think that's fine for that playstyle, right? For me, I think I get 100% where SD's coming from, right? With the whole, if I'm playing a deck that has, some very expensive magic cards in it, and then someone drops this, and I go, do I know any of these people in my pod? No, I don't. I don't know if I want to let you take my things that I might never see again, or we might forget that, you and and I'm speaking from experience here. I have exactly that thing has happened, and I'm the perpetrator. I came away from a Magic tournament one time where we were playing Commander, and I got home, and like a month later, I was opening up my decks, and I found somebody's Omnath in my deck. Why it was in there, I have no idea. But and I have no idea whose it was. Not a clue.
Yeah.
Like I'm like, I don't even know who had this or where it came from, because it was a month later that I found it. Right. So I was like just some random guy that we were playing with. and now his Omnath is in my collection because I don't know who the person was. I have no idea, and I had no way to contact them either. So I was just like, I have no idea who to even like. What do I just put a like a thing that says, "Hey, I found an Omnath in one of my decks. Whose is this?" I'm gonna get like
Yeah.
50 people be like, "Yeah, that's my card. It was totally me that I was playing with you." And yeah, uh, and I think it even ended up in a deck that I had like lent to somebody to play at the event who was like my friend, and they went off and were playing, and then they came back and it was just in there. So it was even someone that I didn't even play with. So I have no way to verify. Right. So
Yeah.
it's just kind of like one of those things. So, that is a real fear for sure. I'm sure for a lot of folks. So I think in that aspect, there is things we can do to, get around that type of thing with random groups. But we can talk about that in the next section of the discussion, right?
Yeah, I think the only thing that I would add, because yeah, I mean, you guys were saying stuff that I genuinely hadn't thought of. I guess, kind of hearing a little bit of that. Ah, you know what? We're gonna save that for the next section because I feel like
Mm,
everything I'm gonna say is more like solving it. But yes,
mhm,
I could definitely see not wanting people to handle expensive cards. I'm a senior citizen at this point, and I like naps, and I can't do 5-hour commander games. That's just,
right.
it's kind of a waste of time. So I could definitely see some of that, but this almost seems like a general for any of these. Hey, shuffle up all the permanents or shuffle everything into the library and reveal that many. And I feel like that is very much just kind of saying like, well, maybe we're at a point in Commander where those types of mass effect cards aren't really in the spirit of the format, to use a phrase that I absolutely despise. Maybe that is kind of like where we've evolved to.
I could see that just based on how few decks that this card's actually in. I think I've only ever experienced it in the wild once. So yeah, I could definitely see
Just wait till that drinkathon come November, buddy.
that.
I've seen it on a spell table game once.
Oh God.
No, no.
Mhm,
And like we insert the Michael from The Office just screaming
mhm.
no over and over. Like it's terrible.
Yep.
But
It was very ridiculous. And it caused just it was one of those games where and the person cast it when there wasn't a lot on the table, so it wasn't so bad to resolve, but even just being like everyone had like infinite tokens there that was like this person's island, right? And it was like it's just this is a nightmare to keep track of, right? Because then you also have a pile of your own cards that are
yeah.
off screen that are like not like they're not exiled and they're not in the graveyard, they're in that person's control over there, right? Like
Oh
they're
God.
playing. So like it's very interesting.
I'm curious. Did that happen on one of your streams or just in a random spell table game?
No, no, it wasn't. So I was in somebody else's stream. I was
Oh,
guesting on
okay.
somebody else's channel, and one of the other guests played it, and I was like, "Oh, this is interesting."
In your
Just,
like mental note, guess on the ban list before you come on to MrBever's Switch channel.
I mean, it didn't
Thieves
bother
Auction.
me. I mean, you know me. I
Yeah.
mean, that's the whole purpose of the show. It didn't bother me at all, but like, it was a very interesting interaction for
Yeah.
Spell Table, right? And I think it was actually like just when we were starting out doing Spell Table games.
Oh, okay.
And it was one of those moments that I went, this type of thing is probably not great for spell table. You know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
these types of effects where it's like I'm now taking other people's cards, not the best when you're remote, you know?
Nope.
No.
Nope. I definitely wouldn't think so. That's for
Mhm.
sure. All right. Well, we are about to head over to that final section. And so before we do, guys, we would love for you to check out our Etsy store, etsy.com/CMDTower. I always do that. Why can't Etsy be like, they're like etsy.com/stores/ it's like my fingerprint, but really just etsy.com. Type CMD Tower into the search logo. You'll find it. Thank you, Lemony Lennings. I saw when I was on my bachelor party, you got one of our foil playmats. Super, super appreciate that. But seriously, guys, we're coming up on the holidays. We do have our Jun sweaters on there. So if you're looking for like an ugly sweater to wear to your LGS, yes, it is hideous looking, but it's awesome at the same time. You should go get that. We also do have our reminder tokens, the Monarch tokens, all that good stuff. So just go to etsy.com, CMD Tower in the search bar, and anything you could do would really, really be helpful. All right, MrBevers, we've been building up to it. What do we need to do to change our salty habits if someone decides to drop a thieves auction at the table?
So I think the biggest one here with this is that this one's going to be one of those ones that needs to be covered with a pregame discussion.
Hmm.
Um, it has to be because um, I think the biggest thing here is that if we were going to sit at a table with random people um, and have a good time playing a game, um, and you have, let's say you have 3 or 4 decks with you, and you go to the LGS and you sit down at a table, and someone doesn't tell you that they have Thieves Auction in their deck, and you play your expensive deck, and now you've got this risk of, well, now my expensive cards are going to be in control of other people, and they may walk
Hmm.
away with them at the end of the night or the end of the game, and I may not remember, or remember to get them back, that kind of stuff. You've got those instances, right? So now, if you know that it up front that it's in their deck, you might play a different deck that doesn't have maybe necessarily all the expensive cards in it, or maybe you even go, okay, well, let me quickly, I'll just proxy these cards into my deck, right? Like,
Hmm.
I have them here, here's the actual copies, but I'm going to proxy them, right? Another thing you can do, right? If you have an expensive deck and you have expensive permanents on the table when this is resolved, you could always give proxies to the people who are now controlling them as opposed to the actual cards, even if you're in person, right? And they might go, oh, that's too difficult. No, it's not that difficult. We'll just give you a piece of paper that represents the card, and you can use that to represent it. And we'll have, if we need to reference the rules, it's right here beside my deck, right? It's
Yeah.
not in my exile. It's not in my graveyard. It's beside me here. And this is a way that we can do this. And that way I don't have to worry about people walking away with my expensive cards at the end of the night. So there's solutions there as well, right? The other thing too, right, is that, I mean, the big one I'm going to say, and this is just me as Mr. B, this is what I would do and how I would handle this card is I would run really crappy permanents in my deck, which is what I already do. So, like, I don't like when someone resolves this card, I go, cool, sounds good, right? Like, I hope you enjoy my Mara Leaf Pixie that makes a green or blue mana and it's a 2/2 flyer. Like, whatever, right? Like, go ahead and take it. Not a big deal, right? I'll
Yeah.
take whatever. What's that? You have a Lux Cannon? Cool, I'll take it. It's fine, right? Like, whatever, kind of weird nonsense you want to do, that's the easiest way, in my opinion, is just, run the cards that you love. And if you're worried about expensive cards or worried about your combos and stuff, um, you know, maybe look at putting other ways to recoup those things, right? Like, there's a lot of ways to return permanents to their owner's hands, right? So after a thieves auction is resolved, you can definitely recover some of your permanents from folks if you need to, right? There's also lots of ways to, find different lines to win with other people's cards, and or you know have other methods in your own deck to win instead of just one. Like, I mean, obviously I'm a bad example of this, as I have my boom headshot deck, which has the win condition of rocket launcher, and if it goes away, then that's it. There's no other win condition in the deck. That's not the right way to build a deck, but it's the way I built that deck. But the point is, like, you should always have multiple avenues of winning, and if you have them all in play at once and you haven't won, there's something wrong, right? um with what's going on in the first place. So I think a thieves auction is not something that we should be too concerned about when it gets resolved or gets cast, I guess, anyway. Because at the end of the day, you're there for fun. The biggest thing, I think, is that people also need to understand with resolving this card, if you're the one casting it, be prepared to have the conversation with the table up front that you have it in your deck. And not only that, but also be prepared to ask people to, like, try to make their decisions when drafting the cards quickly, right? And try not to be too, I guess, like, political about the picks.
Mm.
Do you know what I mean?
Okay.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
a lot of that delays the game, right? In like the, oh, well, if you take that, then I'm going to take this thing from you. Or like, if you take that, I'll take this from them so that they don't get it. Like, those kind of
Mhm.
conversations can start maybe with the initial picks, but then don't do it for every pick, because if you do it for every pick, it makes the picks take forever, right? And yes, I understand that politics can be a big part of the game and people can enjoy that aspect, but maybe not everybody in your pod enjoys that aspect, right? Or at least enjoys it to that extent, right? So a little bit of politicking is, of course, always fine, but don't make it, a 50-minute decision to which card do I pick now, right? And maybe one of the best ways to resolve this type of thing in the future is that if you plan to run thieves auction in your deck, tell people about it up front. Also bring like a timer or something and say, okay, when we resolve this card, if it gets resolved, everybody gets a minute and a half to pick their card, and then we move to the next player, right? And that's it.
Yeah.
Right, you put them on kind of like a chess clock almost, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like, here, you've got a timer, and as soon as your time runs out, you know what I mean, your picks are auto picked by the shuffler, just like Arena, right?
God, if we could figure out someone to create an accessory in real life to have it be a chess clock, but for EDH, so it's like pass, and it's like for the priority, just like MTGO, but have it be in real life. That'd be so nice, because sometimes it's like, man, I swear you're the reason we're here for 2.5 hours. Like, you've been playing for an hour and a half. We have done an hour collectively between the three of us. I think the only thing I would add to that, because you said a lot of things that are going to connect with me, and I'm actually, because I'm going to M30 in Vegas, because I don't do this too much, because I usually, if I'm playing in Kansas City, I'm playing with people that I know, and so I do know, or I trust that if one of my expensive cards ends up in one of their decks, they're going to be like, hey, there's this Grim Monolith, whose is it? And it'll be okay, it's mine. I don't have to worry about people like trying to grab it. But I think what I'm going to do when I'm going into M30, because I would say out of my like 42 decks, 32 plus, or at least over $800, $700, just because cards have gotten so expensive.
Right.
It's like, I put like a $30 card in it 4 years ago. Now that $30 card's $80.
Right.
So I think what I might do is when I sit down, I just might say, and MrBevers, I'm curious if you think this would be a good way to do it. Hey guys, excited to play with you. From a power level perspective, I got decks kind of all over the place, but all of my decks are very expensive. I have some collectible cards in there. If you have anything that needs to deal with one of my cards, just know I'm going to be hand drawing you a proxy. And if that's not okay with you, then either I'm not going to play in the pod, or I just need you to play a different deck. Is that a way to? Because I don't want. And Bevers, I think you and I have talked about this. I don't like I run, hey guys, rule zero, I run Thieves Auction on my deck, because that could give away part of the strategy. Kind of like, I'm not going to announce I have Armageddon in my Kalia deck, even though most people probably assume that I have it in there. So at least this is kind of a covert way for me as the player, at least, not necessarily the one with the Thieves Auction, but it's at least a way that I give those players, like, hey, if you're looking to do theft, or you're going to need to mess around with my deck physically, I can't allow you to do that, but I'm happy to give you some blank pieces of plastic for you to draw on. Would that be an okay way to do it?
So I think yes, but also just be careful that you don't announce that you necessarily have a lot of expensive cards in a public space.
Yeah.
So that's something else. Like, it might be okay for the pod that you're in to hear that, but as soon as you say it out loud, people around you might hear it, and while you're playing, maybe your bag goes walking away, right? You don't want those kind of things to happen either.
Sure.
So I think the statement you're saying is fair, but I think what you would say is, instead of just saying expensive cards, just say, like, if your deck revolves around stealing my permanents or taking my cards in some way, right? Regardless of how you do it, just know that I have proxies ready to give you in that case.
Well,
end of story.
But I'm not saying that I would have proxies ready, because I wouldn't have. Oh, okay.
No. What I mean is, like, you basically just say, like, I will be providing proxies to you for those cards if that's the case, just because I don't want other people handling my cards. And you could even say it from the aspect of, there's a number of reasons why you might not want people handling your cards that are all reasonable things, right? Maybe you don't want, the chances of COVID spreading, that kind of stuff. Like, there's so many options, right, these days, for why you don't want people handling your personal cards. That I think it's totally reasonable to say, if that's the case, then I'm going to give these to you. And I think the same can be said for the rule zero conversation. Like you said, like, you don't like telling people specifics, but right, for instance, with Kalia, you can say, look, there is land destruction in the deck. That's it. You don't need to say mass land destruction. You don't have to say Armageddon. You can just say there is land destruction in the deck. End of story. Right? Right. Same with Thieves Auction. You don't have to tell them specifically Thieves Auction, but you can say, my deck does have the ability to take other people's permanents. End of story. Right? And that's all it has to be. And I think that's all the rule zero conversation needs to be in that case, if you're trying to at least keep some information hidden about what the strategy is, right? Because that can happen as well. Absolutely, 100%, right? Um, I think it's fine. Now, some people may press you for more information as like, well, what kind of this or what kind of that? And if you're not comfortable answering those questions, then you might need to find another pod kind of thing, right? Because that is going to be something that people ask. And unless you can come up with a reason of like, well, I don't want to give away the whole strategy of my deck, they might be like, well, you telling me one card is in your deck is not going to give away your whole strategy, probably, right? Like, chances are that's not the case, right? So that kind of thing, I think a lot of people are gonna probably pressure you on, but at the same time, as long as you come prepared with a proper statement to meet these pods at Magic 30 or whatever event you might be going to, I think you're fine, right? I think it should be okay, and it shouldn't be too bad, right?
All right. Well, SD, how could someone say it to you where then all of a sudden you're not like, what? Thieves Auction on the stack? Scoop.
I think the best way to handle that is with the pregame discussion. Mr. B made like a lot of great points. And I kind of get your point of like not really wanting to give your strategy away with pregame discussion. But I'm of strong belief that if you're playing something like Warp World or Thieves Auction, something that's going to take loads of time to resolve, you need to be very specific about running that in your deck. You need to be like, hey, this is my Chaos deck. I have Thieves Auction in it. Is that okay? And for me, it's going to be like, yeah, you can play that. Just please don't play that card. Or if you're hell bent on playing Thieves Auctions, I'm going to be like, okay, well, I'm just going to walk over here and play at a different table because I don't want to have to run into a card that's going to take 30 minutes to an hour to resolve. So I think it's very important to be transparent about running something like that.
So is yours only the time, or would it still also be you don't want to deal with proxies? Because, like, for example, that could happen with me in my Empress Galena deck. There is no Warp World effects. It's just I'm stealing a whole lot of stuff. So on the expensive card front, if I was like, yeah, no, I'm sorry, man, it's a chaos deck. We're all going to be shuffling around permanents. You could do proxies if you want. Like, if someone said that, would you be like, you know what? Okay, I'll do with proxies. Or would you still be like, nah, I'm out?
No, I would do proxies, and you brought up a good point. I hadn't even thought about that, and I think I'll do that for Vegas as well, just because, I mean, in a setting like that, you don't know what you're going to run into. I mean, it's not like the LGS where you're like, okay, well, I'm just going to go home and come back next week. It's, this is a one-time thing. So the proxy thing is a very good idea. I mean, even something like Infinity tokens, you just pull that out and write on the card. You write the card name on it and hand it to them. That's completely fine.
Awesome. Well, any last thoughts, gentlemen, around Thieves Auction and either why you wish this card would disintegrate? Like someone could do like Back to the Future, go, oh God, what is it, 88? Is it 88?
Yeah, it's 88 miles per hour.
Woo! Thank God. I almost got my nerd card taken away.
Almost.
Oh, man. Well, hopefully our fellow members of the collective, you two have learned how to be a more joyful Magic player when your opponent attempts to throw salt in your eye. I'm Mr. Conover 5, saying good night.
See ya.
All right, audio recording done. Thank you so much, Twitch and YouTube, for coming out. Hope you guys enjoyed getting to listen in on this. We are going to phase out, but we will be rating someone in 15 seconds or less. So hopefully you stick around and keep enjoying some great content from other creators. Have a great night.
Target lost.